You're such an asshole.
How you kids doing? AssholeConsulting.com. We have a request, and if you have a request, you can always go to AssholeConsulting.com, where I, the world's only professional asshole, will answer your questions. And this guy wanted to do, we had the real life marriage, where you guys can write in your stories about your marriage and consequential divorce, because, well, let's just admit that's how it ends anyway. As a warning for predominantly young men about just in general what a bad idea marriage is. But this is real life socialism, because this guy's from the former Soviet Union, and he wanted to do something similar and the same. Unfortunately, I don't think all the iPhone addled, Adderall addled, highly educated but know nothing American suburbanites, young people are going to listen. They are absolutely addicted to the idea that they don't have to work and nothing is their fault. It's a mental illness. They believe in the boogeyman. So you can go ahead and we'll go ahead and read it. I am, and because I think it will provide what the reality was. But I don't think it'll change anything. These people, they don't. You have to understand how evil these people are. They don't care how many millions died, how many millions starved, and how many million to hundreds of millions were oppressed and lost their entire. They don't care. Those people don't exist. These are the most arrogant, self-important people that have ever existed in the human race, and they just want to believe that they can have free shit. They're entitled to it, and nothing bad will come of it. And they literally will dismiss you. That I don't think they well. To be perfectly all right with enslaving other people so you don't have to work, you have to be what is that, sociopath, where you're the only one that exists, or solipsistic. So I'm all for it, because we should read what happened in communism under socialism. We should point out that it is the Democrats and the major leftist parties in the West that want to implement this. I don't want to hear from any of you types. It's socialism and communism. No, shut up. We don't do that here. You're just taking other people's money so you don't have to work. That's it. It's just theft. I don't care what ism you call it. That's all it is. And it has killed more people in peacetime than any wars ever conducted. So let's go through it. Hey, I followed your recent series about real life marriage with interest and wonder. I wondered if it could be expanded to fit other life situations. You guys pay me. We haven't had one of those real life marriages in a while. I'm all for it. If you want to tell me your sob story and your horror story of getting married, send it over. Just I got to charge for it. Expanded to fit other life situations that have nothing to do with marriage or relations between the warring sexes, but might be just as instructive to younger viewers. In the case of my story, it would be real life socialism, or the adventures of an American youth ensnared in the socialist web. This will tell some incidents in my life that took place close to 50 years ago, but I think are still pertinent. You don't need to keep this anonymous, as I've changed all the names except the nicknames. To proceed, my first experience in socialism took place where else? In the American public school system. Oh, I thought you were in the Soviet Union. To be more precise, in my days in junior high school, or as it seems to be called in most parts of the country, middle school. In these days, the free school lunch program, as subsidized by the federal government, was new. At the beginning of the school year, the teacher would give out application forms for students to take home to be filled out by the students' parents. There were a bunch of different forms for different things, and as with most such forms, I generally disposed of them in the nearest trash can on my way to home. At 11 years old, my mind had already taken form as a highly suspicious, untrusting one, especially when it came to anything you'd bring home to mom and pop. I figured anything you gave to them having to do with school was asking for trouble. I didn't have any idea that this particular form had to do with school lunch, not having looked at it. I intended to file it away in the circular file with all the other similar papers, but I was stopped by one of the new middle school acquaintances. In moving to a new school, like middle school, you form a new social circle. And one of the first kids of the circle I was drifting into was, we'll call him Frankie Papadakis. That sounds kind of Greek, and Greek is what he was. The most distinguished thing about Frankie was he was the only kid I knew whose mother was a genuine beauty contest winner. She won the Miss Greek New York pageant contest at Coney Island in her pre-Frankie days, and she was still hot stuff when I knew Frankie, and he had a sister named Elena who was even hotter since she was a carbon copy of her mother but was only 16 years old. Woo, woo, woo. You're a good writer, sir. I'm going to have my coffee. Frankie, by that tender age, had already started to take on the characteristics of a pool hall hustler and tout. He was short, skinny, with dark skin and long, bony nose, jug ears, and long neck and eyes that always seemed to be looking around corners for approaching cops. He even already unusually had, in non-school hours, a cigarette hinged on his lower lip. That day in the cafeteria, I saw Frankie filling out the free lunch form. I asked him what for, and he said, "You hand this in, and they give you a card, and you can get a hot lunch for free." I said, "Yeah, I heard of that, but we can't get any." In my naive mind, I figured such programs were for poor kids whose parents didn't have jobs. Oh, you were young. Frankie put me straight. Nah, my dad says the school district gets a certain amount of money from the government mint in Washington, and they have to spend it all. In our school district, there aren't enough poor kids to give away all the free lunch money, so they just give it to anyone who asks. If they don't give out all the money they get, the next year they won't get any, so they're just begging for people to sign up. I asked, "Is that on the level?" He said, "It don't cost nothing to give in the form. If they approve it, you get free hot lunch. If they don't, you don't lose nothing. I got a card last year, and my parents are loaded. Take what you can get if they're giving it away." Well, there you go. Frankie ain't wrong. So I did. My parents weren't loaded, but they both had good jobs, and we shouldn't have been eligible for any government handout. But if you're going to give it to us, who was I to turn it down? I filled out the form myself, signed my mother's name at the bottom, and about a week later got my free lunch card. My first lesson in getting something for nothing from the government. Let me point out, as I mentioned, that I filled out the form in my childish scrawl and signed my mother's name. The people processing the form had to know it was forgery. They didn't give a shit. No kidding. Really? The public school employees not caring as long as there's free government money and not full-time work? Oh, my goodness. Really? They had a certain amount of free government money to give away. It wasn't their money. I could have filled out the form in crayon and I still would have gotten my free lunch card. Next, we moved to our government employment and more free federal government handouts and subsidies. Just before summer vacation, the year I graduated from middle school, my mother came home from work one day and asked me and my older brother, I'll call him Charlie, if we wanted to make some money. She had an offer for a summer job for each of us. It seemed there was a new summer jobs program through the New York City's Park Department funded by the federal government to provide employment to underprivileged inner city youths to keep them out of trouble in the summertime and let them earn some money. I grew up in a place, you don't have to anonymize this, called Staten Island, which isn't suburban, but certainly isn't inner city. It was the type of scrubby place you'd find on the outskirts of every city where the people are mostly working class or civil service employees like policemen, firemen, sanitation workers, etc. My father was a transit worker. They made a decent salary, have strong unions, vote the straight ticket. Me and my brother weren't exactly the type of inner city trouble and privileged youths. They were supposed to be the target of such largesse. But it seems my mother knew somebody. Oh, nepotism. She had a year or so before gone to work for a community health center in Brooklyn. Up until then, mom had been a respectable secretary in the private sector working for companies that I'm not going to mention here. This was her first job for a nonprofit, and that was to be a permanent black mark on her record. And she spent the rest of her life working for the parasite class. She wasn't a parasite herself, being a secretary and actually doing secretarial work, but she was employed either in a government job or such institutions that survive on the taxpayer's dole. She never again worked for private industry. Well, there was a guy who somehow was attached to this health center. What he actually ever did, I don't know, but if he had a title, it would have been something like community liaison. He was the first activist I ever got to know, and thankfully the last. His name was Tuffy, not kidding. He thought himself as the Che Guevara of Red Hook. I don't know, where's Red Hook? I'd never heard of Che Guevara up to the point in my life and only realized that that was what Tuffy was trying to be much later on, looking back. Did he kill a bunch of people too? He had the whole costume down pat, the beret with the red star pin, the scruffy beard, the big cigar, the army fatigues, the whole shit. Underneath it all, he was the same class of self-serving hustler as my middle-aged school friend Frankie, Only at least Frankie was honest about it and didn't make any show of serving the community. When my mom asked me about the job, I wasn't sure I wanted it. I was a lazy sack of shit and didn't want to waste my summer working. By the time you get to the 8th grade, you realize you don't have many summer vacations left before all the fun stops. But when mom asked, she really wasn't asking. She was telling, you got a chance to work and you're going to take it, she said. And it wasn't made any easier for me when my brother Charlie actually wanted the job and the money. If we both said no, I might have had a chance of avoiding work. But when he said yes and meant it, I was stuck. So one day, right after the school year ended, we go into work with mom to apply for the job and fill out the forms and applications. She could have just brought the forms home and had us fill them out there, but I have an idea that she was trying to teach us something, that life isn't easy, that if you want something like a job, which I didn't want, you had to go out and get it and not just have it handed to you. If that was her idea, the laugh ended up being on her, as we shall see. So one day, right after school, hang on, all right. After the school year ended, we go into work with mom to apply for the job and fill out all the forms and application. Oh, I'm sorry. We got to the health center and met Tuffy for the first time. He got out the applications. We had to get to the health center's company van with him and drive to some city parks department hiring hall out near Kennedy Airport. Mom had told us that she'd pick us up there when it was time to go home. When we got there, they had these picnic type tables set up and kind of a small hangar. And me and Charlie sit down with Tuffy and he fills out the forms and gives them over for us to sign. And about the only thing that wasn't a fabrication on the whole form was our names, but we signed. Tuffy said that he had something to do. So he took off, leaving us there, and we had to sit and wait for mom to come pick us up. Wait, you didn't even do work? These nonprofit people. I just wonder, like, what do you do with your time, man? It was a long wait because that same day, a plane crashed on its approach to the airport, killing most of everyone on board. I believe it was up to that time the deadliest crash in U.S. history and kind of a landmark, and that it was the crash that led to the discovery of hazards of wind shear. Much of the debris ended up on Rockaway Boulevard, one of the main roads serving JFK. So naturally, all the roads into the area were closed. And mom didn't get to us until about 9 o'clock that night. What a day of jolly fun. Well, it goes without saying we got the jobs. We had the proper qualifications. We knew Tuffy. The job supposedly entailed working in the city parks and playgrounds, cleaning up the parks, keeping them neat and tidy and safe for all the children. However, we were never told where to report, what park we were to work at, or other such information. You got his money. They didn't care. You got to get rid of the money. We got mom to ask Tuffy about it, and he told us we should just go to any park and start cleaning up. Oh, that didn't sound kosher to me because I thought we'd go clean up a park for 2 weeks with no proof we'd done any work. And how are we supposed to get paid under those circumstances? We asked mom about this. Mom asked Tuffy. Tuffy said not to worry. Just by luck, there happened to be a city park across the street from my mom's work. So she said we should go into work with her on our first day and see if we could work on that park. When we got there, she told us to go to the park and see what we could do. We did as instructed. What gets me is like, your mom actually believed this guy. And there was a guy there who was at work and we went to him. He spoke the dialect of Italian known as Sicilio Brooklynese. When we asked him what we were supposed to do, he said, how the hell do I know? He had never heard of the work program we were supposed to be engaged in. And furthermore, we should get the hell out. Anyone, any punks like you getting my job. So that took care of that. We reported our experience to mom at the health center. Couldn't you just like shoveled some driveways or mowed some yards? And then just sat around for the rest of the day doing nothing. Again, she had to consult with Tuffy. Tuffy said that we should just stay home and he'd tell us when and where we're supposed to pick up our paychecks. This didn't sit well with mom. She wanted us to learn some work ethic and hear the community. Well, your parents vote Democrat? Here, the community liaison was telling us to stay home and only show up on payday. Laughing out loud, laughing out loud, laughing out loud. That's the government mint, mom. Sorry, mom. I don't mean to laugh, but I can't help it. My mother had grown up in a convent raised by the Holy Sisters and was taught that there was a certain right way to approach life, and having her teenage son collecting what was, for all intents and purposes, a welfare check was not part of that approach. What she ended up doing was make us go to work with her every day and help around the office, whatever they could find us do. Charlie had it easy. He was always the good son. He actually taught himself how to type. I mean, the correct touch typing method from Greg Typing Manual. He said he wanted to know how to type because it would make it easier in high school and college. I mean, who thinks about high school and college when they're 12 years old? I thought about the Chicago White Sox, and the only adult skill I had picked up was how to chew tobacco. Charlie got to do nice, clean, easy paperwork. Me, I got stuck with custodian. With the custodian. He was a Puerto Rican guy, maybe 30 years old, named Hincho. I assumed it was his nickname. I don't know what Hincho means in Spanish, but from the sound of it, I don't think he picked it up hanging around church. He must have had some weird racial mixture because he looked Latino but had light skin, a horse face with big teeth, a shaggy blondish afro, and grubby blonde beard. Wow, that is different. He would stand out, but no mustache. This was the 70s, man. We we too did general janitorial stuff, but what's funny to me now, thinking back, is how they had no consideration for biohazardous materials. Remember, this was a health center where blood and other precious bodily fluids were splashed around. We just stuff everything to trash bags and drag the bags out of the dumpsters in the back. We were brave people in those days. And here you are to talk about it. We didn't see a danger in everything we did. I did notice that Honcho used to collect used needles from the trash, and as naive as I might have been, I knew why he was doing that. He said it was to give to his friends, but give is a relative term. You could give something like a needle to your friends, and they might give you $5 back. I don't know. It wasn't my business. I reckon Hincho figured if he left the needles in the dumpsters, the neighborhood junkies would dig them out and end up with them anyway. And if that was so, at least the profit should go to Hincho. These are the 70s, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You didn't miss out on anything. The biggest job I remember doing with Hincho was that they were having trouble getting a proper draft through the flue. And now that it was summer and the furnace was off, they set Hincho up to the roof to check it out, with me tagging along. Yeah, me and Hincho were going to figure out their heating systems problem. Me, a 13-year-old kid, and Hincho with his degree in HVAC engineering from Phoenix House. But we actually did find at least part of the problem. There were a bunch of dead pigeons in the flue, and we dragged them out. It seems pigeons would light up the flue up there and be overcome with the fumes and fall in. Chalk one up for Hincho. A couple of years later, my mom told me that Hincho had killed himself, not by self-deletion, but when he was doing stunts on a bicycle, trying to do an Evel Knievel or some garbage cans and landing on his head. Oh, that's too bad. But the whole thing of going into work with mom and helping around the office only lasted about 2 weeks because it was more of a hassle for her than it was for us. Yep. She gave up on the whole thing and said, well, if you're going to be sitting around at home getting paid, you're at least going to keep the yard clean. And we did. And every 2 weeks we had to go into the city to an office to pick up our pay. Whatever happened to Tuffy? He's got to be like this old, pissed off, like completely wasted his life boomer, just trying to like get free money and shit. Has like no love. No one's visiting him in the nursing home. And we did. Every 2 weeks, we had to go into the city to an office to pick up our paychecks, and we did get paid for doing nothing. The program lasted 8 weeks, so I got our 4 paychecks, about $200 each. $800 from Uncle Sam. That was damn good money for an 8th grader in 1975. Those are the last government checks I ever got until years later I worked while working for the Postal Service. The lessons I learned in my adventures in socialism are the following: an automatic hatred for anyone with the word activist attached to his or her name. A realization you can get something for nothing if you know the right people. 3, you can also bluff your way into free handouts in the case of free school lunches if you have enough gall. 4, the good intentions of women, in my case, my mom, even when totally sincere, always somehow seem to go askew. I would also say socialists are heavily dependent on women's naivete, like their good intentions. I just want to help people. Okay. Vote to take all that man's money away. Well, won't that result in the factory being closed? No, he didn't earn. Oh, okay. I want to help. I want to do the right thing. 5, the habits and thought processes that will establish a person's approach to life will be evident by the time that person is 12 years old. Very little will change will take place after that. The hardworking forward looker will already be that by 12, my brother. So will the schemer, my pal Frankie. So will the lazy sack of shit, me. The number of people who actually change from their evolved disposition at age 12 is so small that it can be realistically considered to be nil. Corroborating evidence that a buddy of mine's a cop, and we're talking because in my day I had to kick out bums and homeless and all that. And I always noticed that they were like no different than teenagers. You know, you could be a 50-year-old homeless guy if they were sober. And he was talking about like, yeah, that he's always, no matter what their age, they're like 12-year-olds. Like little children expect that have everything taken care of. And he says that mentality doesn't go away. It's because we all allow them to live for free. And so if you never had to like actually get a job, yeah, you're gonna be arrested development at the age of 12. 6, don't hire an ex-drug addict to work at a medical facility where drugs and drug paraphernalia are just lying around to be taken. 7, you spend at least 1/3 of your working life making money that will be taken away from you and given to people who don't work. And it will be the people taking your money and giving it away, not you, who will get the credit for it. I learned this by the time I was 13 years old, so my brief adventures in socialism were a worthy part of my education. All right, there you go. Socialism in the boroughs. We got some comments here. My truth, $2. Society is burning, but here's some shekels. Thank you. My shekels will be converted to things that have value. Evan M, 5 Canadian bucks. Do you agree with Curtis Yarvan's statement? I don't know who he is, that America isn't communist, but Black Americans live under communism. There's some truth to that. The rules, Black Americans, social and literal, are definitely communistic, but more culturally. Because anytime a Black man or woman, for that matter, makes progress, everyone's like, "Oh, you think you're better? When you go back to the community, like when you get off your fat, lazy ass and get a job." So that's culturally there. But it lives off the back of a quasi-capitalist system. Like if you didn't have, like, let's say all the United States was just the Black community, what would who's producing? Who's like, if it was just Southside Chicago and there was no North, like, okay, who's doing the jobs? What's happening there? I'd be curious what inevitably. I'm hungry. I'd like to eat. I'd be curious how it would evolve, but it's financed, couched within, piggybacking off of a quasi generally functioning economy. But America's getting there. America in general is going to get there. But yeah, it's sort of, I could see him saying that. Certainly some segments in the Black, not all, of course, but you know, your barrios, not your barrios, your ghettos, kind of, yeah, I could see it, but more on the familial and cultural level. Yeah, I could see it. I could see it. They just haven't gotten the gulags yet. Sean Johnson, $5. Why did you say there wasn't any socialism in the 90s when the rich were taxed at 91% back then? Well, they did have high marginal tax brackets, and that was for such a few people. There was an incredibly high tax bracket, but so few people were there that if you look at, you know, some people would say, look at that. It's like, yeah, but if only, I think, 40,000 people paid it, they may have only paid it once. What you got to do is look at total government take of the economy. And that's what I would use to measure how communistic or capitalistic an economy is. And right now we're at about 38%. You're in the 40s if you consider the money being printed off. Back in the 50s, let's just take a look. I think it was like in the 20s%. I mean, total government spending to GDP US looks like in the United States back then. Here we go. Okay, so the 1950s. Is this federal? That's federal. That's not total. I need total. Total. Here we go. Yeah. It was total was about 22% in the 50s. Now we're at about 40. So it's almost doubled. So, but yeah, look how well it's working. We should take more of everybody's money. That's great. All right, there you go. Questions, answers, assholeconsulting.com. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.